7 years ago, Ethan Calloway signed our divorce papers without reading a single page. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask why. He didn't even look at me. Standing inside the grand foyer of the Calloway estate overlooking the San Antonio River Walk, he scribbled his signature across the final page before tossing the documents back onto the marble table. "Claire," he said coldly, zipping up his suitcase, "stop trying to manipulate me." His voice carried the same irritation I'd grown used to over the years. "Lillian can't travel overseas alone. She's recovering, and she needs me." Recovering. That was always the excuse. If Lillian had a headache, Ethan disappeared. If she felt anxious, Ethan canceled our plans. If she cried, I ceased to exist. I looked at him, my hands trembling around the divorce agreement. "Ethan." He didn't let me finish. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder? I almost laughed. I just lost our baby 2 days earlier. He didn't even know. Or maybe he simply never cared enough to notice. He pulled his suitcase toward the front door. Outside, a black SUV waited with its engine running. Lillian Hart sat in the passenger seat. Her pale face looked delicate beneath oversized sunglasses. When she noticed me standing in the doorway, the corner of her lips lifted into the smallest smile. Only for a second. Then it disappeared. Anyone else would have mistaken her expression for sympathy. I knew better. I'd seen that smile before. The smile she'd worn while watching my entire life fall apart. Without another word, Ethan climbed into the SUV. The vehicle disappeared into the rainy streets of San Antonio. And just like that, 5 years of marriage ended in less than 30 seconds. It rained until midnight. I never left the front gate. The security guards asked twice whether I wanted a ride. I shook my head. Maybe. Some foolish part of me still believed Ethan would remember something. Our anniversary. My birthday. The child we'd dreamed about. Me. Instead, nothing happened. The rain soaked through my coat. My knees finally gave out. The last thing I remembered was the cold pavement rushing toward my face. When I woke up, everything smelled like antiseptic. Hospital lights blurred above me. A quiet voice spoke beside the bed. "You scared the hell out of me." I slowly turned my head. Daniel Brooks sat in the chair beside me. His dress shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows. Rainwater still darkened the shoulders of his jacket. He looked like he'd driven through a hurricane. "You found me?" He nodded. "I was heading back from a meeting downtown." His voice stayed calm. "I saw someone lying outside the Calloway estate." I swallowed. "My baby." Silence filled the room. Daniel lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Soft. Honest. Nothing like the empty comfort I'd heard from Ethan for years. Tears rolled silently across my face. Daniel didn't tell me to stop crying. He didn't tell me to be strong. He simply stayed. Sometimes presence says more than words ever could. The next morning I returned to the Calloway mansion. Not because I hoped Ethan had changed his mind. Because I wanted closure. The housekeepers were packing luggage into another SUV. Apparently Ethan and Lillian's flight left within the hour. I walked inside. He was fastening his watch. When he saw me, he frowned. "What are you doing here?" I held the divorce papers in my hands. "I came to say goodbye." His expression softened. Only slightly. For less than a second. Then it vanished. "Claire." He sighed impatiently. "You'll thank me one day." "For what?" "Giving you a chance to start over." Those words almost made me smile. Start over? After destroying everything we'd built together? I placed the signed papers on the table. "They're official now." He glanced at them. Good. That was it. No apology. No regret. No questions. No goodbye. He rolled his suitcase toward the front door. As he passed me, I quietly asked, "If I disappeared today?" He paused. "Barely. Would you even notice?" He never answered. The front door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the empty mansion. That was the last time I saw Ethan Calloway. For 7 years. Life has a strange sense of humor. Sometimes the people who swear you'll never survive without them become strangers. And the strangers who quietly help you stand become your family. Daniel never asked me to forget Ethan. He never tried to replace my past. Instead, he simply gave me a future. He helped me lease a charming independent bookstore in the historic Pearl District. He painted the shelves himself, installed every light fixture, even built a tiny reading corner for children because, as he put it, every bookstore deserves a little magic. At first, I thought he was simply kind. Months later, I realized kindness like his wasn't ordinary. It was love. The kind that asks for nothing in return. 1 year after my divorce, I married Daniel Brooks. Quietly. No reporters. No wealthy families. No extravagant ballroom. Just 2 people. A small chapel outside San Antonio. And promises neither of us ever intended to break. 7 years later, I was arranging new arrivals inside Brooks and Bloom Books when my phone vibrated. "Daniel. I just picked Mason up from school. He insisted we stop for cheesecake. Don't work too late. We're waiting for you." I smiled. Mason wasn't biologically mine. He was ours. Our little miracle. 5 years old. Curious. Endlessly talkative. The light that had slowly filled every dark corner of my heart. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. The bell above the bookstore door chimed. I looked up. My smile disappeared. Standing in the doorway, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, was Ethan Calloway. 7 years older. Just as arrogant. And somehow, still convinced the world had been waiting for his return. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The bookstore was quiet except for the soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers and the hum of the espresso machine in the reading corner. Ethan looked exactly as I remembered. Perfectly tailored suit. Expensive watch. Confident posture. The kind of man who walked into every room believing he owned it. Only this time, he wasn't walking into one of his offices. He was standing inside my world. His eyes slowly traveled across the bookstore. The handmade oak shelves. Children reading in beanbags near the window. Fresh flowers on the checkout counter. Family photos hanging beside framed newspaper articles praising the store as one of San Antonio's favorite independent bookshops. His gaze finally settled on me. "So," he said with a faint smirk, "this is what you've been doing." I closed the novel I had been organizing. "Can I help you?" He ignored the question. I expected better. I almost laughed. "You expected?" He stepped closer. "I assumed you'd eventually come back." "Back where?" "To me." The confidence in his voice was astonishing. As though 7 years had been a brief inconvenience instead of an entire lifetime. I folded my arms. "Ethan. I'm serious." He glanced around again. "This little bookstore can't possibly be enough for you." I looked around the room. Warm lights. Customers smiling. A little girl hugging a stack of fairy tales nearly as tall as she was. An elderly couple sharing coffee near the fireplace. Enough? This place had given me peace. Something his mansion never had. "I love this bookstore." He frowned. "No. His voice carried absolute certainty. You've convinced yourself you do. That sentence reminded me of the old Ethan. The one who always believed he understood my feelings better than I did. The one who decided what I wanted. What I deserved. What I was allowed to dream about. He leaned against the counter. My grandfather is dying. I stayed silent. His final wish. He paused dramatically. Is to meet his great-grandchild. I blinked. And? His jaw tightened. You'll come back. I stared at him. I'm sorry. You heard me. His tone became businesslike. We'll remarry. I genuinely wondered whether I had misheard him. You'll return to the Calloway family. His expression suggested he was offering me a priceless gift. We'll have a child. And afterward. He added calmly. Everything can go back to normal. For a heartbeat. I couldn't speak. Then I laughed. Not politely. Not nervously. A genuine laugh. Several customers looked over. Ethan's face darkened. What's funny? You. His eyebrows lifted. You honestly believe I'd leave my husband? I emphasized the word. To become your wife again? His expression froze. Husband? Yes. He shook his head almost immediately. Claire. His voice softened in the patronizing way I hated most. You don't need to lie. I'm not lying. You've always been terrible at it. I reached into my purse. Inside was a folded ultrasound photograph. I wasn't planning to show anyone today. Daniel had slipped it into my bag that morning because he said it made him smile during work. I placed it gently on the counter. Ethan looked down. Then back at me. What is this? Our baby. His eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that? I'm 12 weeks pregnant. Silence. He picked up the ultrasound. Studied it. His expression barely changed. Then he chuckled. Cute. I tilted my head. What? This isn't yours. I stared at him. It belongs to some friend. He tossed the picture back onto the counter. You found it online. I couldn't help smiling. You still think everything revolves around you. His eyes hardened. Claire. There is no man. There is. No successful man would marry a woman with your history. That sentence landed like a punch. Not because it hurt. Because it sounded exactly like the Ethan I had finally escaped. You've always underestimated yourself. No. I corrected quietly. You underestimated me. He stepped closer. Who is he? My husband. I know that. No. His patience disappeared. I want his name. I looked directly into his eyes. Daniel Brooks. The confidence vanished from Ethan's face for the first time. Daniel Brooks? Yes. The CEO of Brooks Development? I nodded. He laughed. A loud, disbelieving laugh. Claire. If you're going to invent a husband, at least choose someone believable. I smiled again. That's exactly what Daniel said when we first met. His expression tightened. You expect me to believe one of the wealthiest men in Texas married you? I don't need you to believe anything. I simply picked up the ultrasound. Slipped it back into my purse. I'm living my life. He crossed his arms. I'll investigate. I shrugged. Go ahead. His eyes narrowed. You always were stubborn. No. I answered softly. I just finally learned my worth. For a moment. Neither of us moved. Then Ethan's phone rang. The caller ID flashed across the screen. Lillian. He answered immediately. Lillian? A weak voice came through the speaker. Ethan. My chest hurts again. His expression changed instantly. I'll be there. The familiar scene played out exactly as it had hundreds of times before. He forgot I existed. Again. He ended the call. I have to go. I smiled politely. Of course you do. He looked almost irritated that I wasn't upset. I'll come back. You don't have to. I wasn't asking. He turned toward the door before stopping. Without looking back, he said. My offer still stands. You belong with me. The bell above the entrance rang as he walked outside. I watched through the window as his black Mercedes disappeared into traffic. Only after he was gone did I finally exhale. A quiet voice spoke behind me. I didn't know bookstores came with free drama. I turned around. Olivia, my assistant manager, stood frozen beside the register, holding 3 mystery novels. She blinked twice. Was that seriously your ex-husband? I smiled tiredly. Unfortunately. She looked toward the window. He acts like he lost a car. Not a wife. I laughed. No. I whispered. He acts like he lost something he thought would always belong to him. At that exact moment, the bell above the bookstore door chimed once again. But this time, a familiar little voice echoed through the store. Mom. I turned. 5-year-old Mason sprinted across the bookstore with a paper bag from our favorite bakery swinging wildly in one hand. Behind him, walking in with the calm confidence that had changed my life, was Daniel Brooks. He smiled the moment our eyes met. And without saying a word, everything inside me felt safe again. The moment Mason spotted me, he ran straight into my arms. Mom. I crouched just enough to catch him without putting pressure on my growing belly. Easy, buddy. He grinned from ear to ear, proudly lifting the paper bakery bag. Dad let me pick dessert. Oh. Chocolate cheesecake. He leaned closer and whispered as though sharing a national secret. I picked the biggest one. I laughed. I'm shocked. You should be. Behind him, Daniel approached with 2 cups of coffee balanced in one hand. His navy blazer was draped over his shoulder, his tie already loosened after a long day at the office. Despite running one of Texas's largest real estate firms, he never walked around demanding attention. He simply had a quiet confidence that made everyone around him feel calmer. He stopped beside us. Hi. He kissed my forehead. Then glanced at Mason. I see someone already told you about dessert. I negotiated. Mason nodded proudly. Daniel smiled. I'm afraid that's true. His eyes shifted toward Olivia, who was pretending not to stare. She immediately looked away, suddenly fascinated by the receipt printer. Daniel chuckled before turning back to me. Everything okay? I hesitated for barely a second. Before I could answer, Olivia blurted out. Her ex-husband was here. Silence. Daniel didn't react immediately. Instead, he calmly placed both coffees on the counter. When? About 10 minutes ago. What did he want? I answered before Olivia could. He wants me back. Daniel blinked once. Interesting. He also suggested we should have another baby together. For the first time all afternoon. Daniel actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the idea was so unbelievably ridiculous. I'm sorry. He rubbed his forehead. I know I shouldn't laugh. But that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Even Olivia couldn't hold back a smile. Daniel looked at me again. Did he threaten you? No. Touch you? No. Raise his voice? No. He nodded once. Good. That was all. No jealousy. No interrogation. No possessiveness. Just quiet concern. Exactly the way love should feel. An hour later the bookstore had emptied. Olivia locked the front door before waving goodbye. The four of us, Daniel, Mason, our golden retriever Charlie, and I, were finally alone. Charlie wandered between the shelves searching for crumbs Mason had undoubtedly dropped. Daniel unpacked the cheesecake while I sorted the day's receipts. Mason climbed onto one of the reading benches. Dad? Who's Ethan? The room became still. Children noticed everything. Daniel looked toward me. I nodded slightly. It's okay. He pulled a chair beside Mason. Ethan. He chose his words carefully. Is someone Mommy knew a long time ago. Were they friends? No. Were they enemies? Daniel smiled. Something like that. Mason considered this seriously. Did he make Mom cry? Neither of us answered immediately. Children could always recognize silence. Daniel finally nodded. Yes. Mason frowned. I don't like him. I don't either. Daniel said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed. Mason looked relieved. Good. Then he happily returned to eating cheesecake. Just like that. The conversation was over. Children had a remarkable ability to move on from difficult things. Adults. Not so much. That night, after Mason had fallen asleep upstairs, Daniel and I sat on the bookstore's rooftop terrace overlooking downtown San Antonio. The city lights shimmered across the warm Texas evening. He handed me a cup of chamomile tea. I've already guessed. I looked at him. Ethan isn't going to let this go. No. He looked surprised. He looked offended. Daniel smiled slightly. Because you moved on. He genuinely believed I'd spend my life waiting for him. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Men like him confuse possession with love. His words lingered in the quiet night. After several minutes, I asked. Do you ever regret marrying me? He looked genuinely confused. Why would I? Because of everything that came with me. My past. The drama. The lawsuits. The gossip. Daniel reached across the small table and took my hand. Claire. I married all of you. The woman who survived. The woman who rebuilt herself. The woman who laughs too loudly during movies. The woman who alphabetizes books when she's stressed. I laughed. I do not. You absolutely do. I organize. You color code. It's different. He smiled. My point is. He squeezed my hand gently. I never wanted a version of you without a past. I wanted you. Those simple words somehow healed wounds that years of apologies never could. Across town. Inside the Calloway estate. Ethan sat alone in his grandfather's private study. His grandfather's breathing had grown weaker over the past month. The old man stared out the window without speaking. Finally he asked. Did you find her? Yes. And? Ethan hesitated. She's married. The old man slowly turned. Married? Apparently. His grandfather frowned. Apparently? She claims she's married to Daniel Brooks. For several seconds. The elderly man simply stared at him. Then he sighed. Claims? You don't believe her? I haven't confirmed it. His grandfather laughed. A dry, tired laugh. Ethan. Do you honestly think someone would invent a marriage to Daniel Brooks? Ethan remained silent. The old man continued. The Brooks family has been one of the most respected names in Texas for decades. I know. So if she says she's his wife, there's a good chance she is. Ethan's expression darkened. It doesn't make sense. His grandfather looked disappointed. What doesn't? Why him? The old man answered immediately. Because while you were chasing another woman, someone else noticed your wife. Silence. For the first time, that possibility truly settled inside Ethan's mind. Not that Claire had moved on. Not that she'd survived. But that another man had loved everything Ethan had taken for granted. And somehow, that realization hurt far more than the divorce papers he had signed 7 years earlier. The next morning, San Antonio was already alive. Morning commuters filled the streets around the Pearl District. Cyclists passed the bookstore. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the open windows. For anyone walking by, it looked like another peaceful day. I almost believed it would be. Almost. At 10:30, the bell above the bookstore door chimed. I looked up from the register. Lillian Hart walked inside. She wore an elegant cream-colored dress and oversized sunglasses despite being indoors. Everything about her was carefully arranged. Perfect makeup. Perfect posture. Perfect fragility. She slowly removed her sunglasses and smiled. Claire. Her voice sounded warm enough to fool anyone. It's been a long time. I closed the ledger in front of me. What do you want, Lillian? She glanced around the bookstore with obvious curiosity. So, this is your little business. Our business. I corrected calmly. My husband's and mine. Her smile stiffened for only a fraction of a second. I heard Ethan visited yesterday. I'm sure you did. He tells me everything. I doubt that. She laughed softly. You always were stubborn. No. I just learned to stop believing your lies. Instead of answering, she wandered between the shelves. Her fingers brushed across book spines as though she were inspecting a hotel she might purchase. She stopped near the children's section. Very charming. I didn't reply. She continued. But honestly, I expected more. I smiled politely. Then your expectations are your problem. She turned toward me. Ethan says you're pregnant. That's correct. She folded her arms. Congratulations. Her tone carried no warmth. Only calculation. I hope this one survives. The room became perfectly silent. For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd imagined what she'd said. Slowly, I looked at her. What did you just say? She tilted her head innocently. Oh. I'm sorry. I forgot. You've always been sensitive. My fingers tightened around the book I was holding. Sensitive? She knew exactly how I'd lost my first child. She had been there. 7 years earlier. Rain hammered against the SUV windows. I was lying halfway down the marble staircase outside the Calloway mansion. Every breath hurt. Blood spread beneath me. I remember screaming Ethan's name. Again. And again. The front passenger window slowly rolled down. Lillian looked directly at me. Our eyes met. She saw the blood. She saw me trying to crawl toward the front door. She saw everything. For one impossible second, I believed she'd help. Instead, she smiled. A tiny smile. Then she rolled the window back up. The SUV drove away, leaving me alone. Claire. Lillian's voice pulled me back into the present. You look pale. I took a slow breath. You should leave. She ignored me. You know, I've always wondered. What exactly did Ethan ever see in you? I asked him that once. I stared at her. He said you were kind. She laughed. I couldn't stop laughing either. I slowly placed the novel onto the counter. Lillian. I'm asking nicely. Leave. She stepped closer. No. You've spent 7 years pretending you won. I did. She smiled. No. You married another man because Ethan stopped loving you. No. I married another man because he showed me what love actually looks like. Something flickered across her face. Jealousy. Real jealousy. She recovered almost immediately. You really believe that? I know it. Her voice sharpened. Ethan still came looking for you. He came because his grandfather is dying. He came because he needs an heir. He didn't come because he loves you. I never said he did. Then why are you smiling? Because none of that matters anymore. For the first time. Lillian's perfect composure cracked. You think you're better than me? No. I think I'm happier than you. That sentence landed exactly where I intended. Her expression darkened. You've always acted innocent. I was. Oh, please. She laughed bitterly. You stole Ethan from me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I met Ethan 2 years before he ever met you. She dismissed my words with a wave. Details. No. They're facts. He chose me. He married me. You were just convenient. I looked at her quietly. You've been telling yourself that story for years, haven't you? Her jaw tightened. If he loved you, why did he spend every holiday with me? Why did he answer every one of my phone calls? Why did he leave you whenever I cried? The answer was painfully simple. Because Ethan confused guilt with love. An obsession with responsibility. I didn't need to explain that to her. Instead, I asked. Do you know why he came yesterday? She blinked. He asked me to divorce Daniel. Her confident smile returned. Exactly. So he could marry me again. The smile disappeared. What? He wants me back. She laughed immediately. You're lying. I wish I were. He wouldn't. He did. No. He loves me. I looked at her calmly. Then why is he asking another woman to have his children? Color slowly drained from her face. For the first time. She looked genuinely frightened. Not because of me. Because she suddenly realized something. If Ethan could replace me once. Perhaps. He could replace her too. The bell above the bookstore rang. Both of us turned. Ethan walked inside. He stopped the instant he saw us standing face to face. Lillian? His voice carried surprise. What are you doing here? She forced a smile. I came to talk. He looked between us. What happened? Before I could answer, Lillian spoke first. Claire was trying to convince me that you wanted her back. She laughed nervously. Can you believe that? Ethan didn't laugh. Instead, he stayed completely silent. Lillian slowly turned toward him. Ethan? He looked at me. Not at her. At me. I told her the truth. His quiet voice echoed through the bookstore. I asked Claire to come back. Lillian's face turned white. You, what? I asked her to come home. You told me yesterday you were meeting a lawyer. I was. You said it was about Grandpa. It is. No. She took a step backward. You promised. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Lillian. I never promised anything. The word struck her harder than a slap. For 7 years. She had believed she was the woman Ethan truly loved. And in less than 30 seconds, that illusion began to collapse. I watched silently. For the first time, their perfect little world was starting to crack. And neither of them had noticed that I was no longer standing inside it. Lillian stood frozen in the middle of the bookstore. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For years, she had convinced herself that Ethan stayed by her side because he loved her. Now, standing only a few feet away, he had admitted the truth in front of everyone. He had gone looking for Claire. Not her. Silence stretched between the three of us. Finally, Lillian forced a laugh. "You're joking." Nobody answered. She looked at Ethan again. "Tell me you're joking." Ethan exhaled heavily. "It isn't what you think." Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "Oh, really? Then explain it to me. You asked your ex-wife to come back. You asked her to have your children. And somehow, I'm supposed to believe this has nothing to do with me?" Customers who had been quietly browsing the shelves slowly began leaving the store, sensing the tension in the room. Olivia discreetly flipped the sign on the front door from open to closed. No one needed an audience for what was about to happen. Lillian stepped closer to Ethan. "I gave you 7 years. I stood beside you. I defended you. I sacrificed everything. And now you're throwing me away because your grandfather wants an heir?" Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This isn't about replacing you." "Then what is it?" "It's about responsibility." I almost laughed. Responsibility. 7 years ago, responsibility had apparently boarded a plane to Europe with Lillian. Now it had suddenly remembered my address. I finally spoke. Interesting choice of words. Both of them looked toward me. I calmly leaned against the counter. "You weren't interested in responsibility when I was lying on those stairs." Ethan's face stiffened. "Claire. No. You don't get to interrupt this time." For years I had replayed that day in my mind. Every detail. Every second. Every drop of blood. Now, I wasn't afraid of remembering anymore. I told you I didn't feel well. I begged you to take me to the hospital. You pushed my hand away. You said Lillian needed you more. Ethan lowered his eyes. I didn't know. No. You didn't bother to know. The bookstore fell silent again. Lillian crossed her arms. You always exaggerate. I looked directly at her. Do I? You weren't there. I was. No. You were in the car. You watched. Her confident expression wavered. I don't know what you're talking about. You watched me fall. You saw the blood. You looked straight at me. You smiled. I didn't. You rolled the window up. Her breathing became uneven. Ethan slowly turned toward her. Lillian. She quickly grabbed his arm. She's lying. I was sick. I wasn't paying attention. I shook my head. That's not true. You looked directly into my eyes. For the first time since entering the bookstore. Ethan looked uncertain. Not confused. Not angry. Uncertain. As though tiny pieces of a memory he had ignored for years were beginning to return. He remembered the rain. He remembered my phone calls. He remembered arriving at the airport without ever checking whether I had made it home safely. His voice became unusually quiet. Claire. Were you really pregnant? The question hung heavily in the air. I stared at him. You still don't know? He swallowed. My baby. I corrected him immediately. Our baby. Silence. I lost our child the day you left. No one moved. No one breathed. Lillian's face turned ghostly white. Ethan looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. What? His voice barely existed. What did you say? I was 8 weeks pregnant. The doctors couldn't save the baby. You never noticed. You never asked. You never came to the hospital. I signed the divorce papers the day after the surgery. The color completely drained from Ethan's face. His knees almost gave out. No. His whisper cracked. That's impossible. It isn't. I would have known. I smiled sadly. You would have known. If you had looked back. The weight of those words crushed the room. Ethan's breathing grew uneven. He slowly sat down in one of the reading chairs as though his body could no longer support him. Every memory he had ignored for 7 years suddenly began fitting together. My pale face. My shaking hands. The divorce papers. The rain. The unanswered phone calls. And finally, the silence. He covered his face with both hands. Oh, God. Across from him, Lillian stood completely motionless. She realized exactly what would happen next. For years, Ethan had blamed Claire for leaving. Now he was beginning to understand. She had never abandoned him. He had abandoned her. And once that truth fully settled into his heart, nothing between Ethan and Lillian would ever be the same. No one spoke. The bookstore felt impossibly quiet, as though even the walls were waiting for someone to say something that could erase the last 7 years. Nothing could. Ethan remained seated, staring blankly at the wooden floor. His hands trembled. You. His voice barely rose above a whisper. You were carrying my child? I nodded. Yes. And? He swallowed hard. The baby died? I lost our baby the same afternoon you left for Europe. His breathing became uneven. I didn't know. No. You never gave yourself the chance to know. Tears gathered in his eyes. For the first time since I had met Ethan Calloway nearly 15 years ago, I saw genuine regret. Not frustration. Not wounded pride. Regret. He looked up at me. Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't stop myself from smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally grown tired of carrying another person's guilt. I tried. His brow furrowed. I called you. 6 times. You never answered. I came back to the house. You were packing. I begged you not to leave. You told me I was making a scene. Each sentence landed heavier than the one before. I handed you the divorce papers. You signed them without reading. You walked away. And I never saw you again. Ethan closed his eyes. Fragments of that day flooded back. Claire standing in the hallway. Her face pale. Her hands shaking. The rain. Her voice breaking as she called his name. How had he missed it? How had he ignored everything? Because he hadn't been looking. He had only been looking at Lillian. Suddenly, he stood and turned toward her. You knew? Lillian's entire body stiffened. You knew she lost the baby? I didn't. His voice hardened. Look at me. She slowly raised her eyes. Did you know? Tears rolled down her cheeks. I saw her fall. Ethan's face changed. You saw her? I didn't understand what happened. You saw the blood? I thought. You thought what? That she'd be fine. His jaw clenched. Lillian. You left her there? She stepped toward him desperately. I was scared. You kept telling me your chest hurt. I panicked. You told me we had to leave. I didn't know she was pregnant. But you knew she was hurt. Silence. That silence answered everything. Ethan slowly pulled his arm away as Lillian reached for him. For the first time in 7 years. He refused to comfort her. She stared at him in disbelief. Ethan. You always believed me. I believed the version of you I wanted to see. His voice was calm. Too calm. What else have you lied about? Her breathing became faster. I never lied. No? He laughed bitterly. You told me Claire manipulated me. You told me she wanted my money. You told me she was pretending to be sick. You told me she hated you because she was jealous. He looked around the bookstore. Then back at me. And every single time. I believed you. Lillian shook her head frantically. No. You chose to believe me. She wasn't wrong. That hurt Ethan even more. Because deep down, he knew it was true. No one had forced him to abandon me. He had chosen to. His phone rang. The screen lit up. Grandpa. He stared at it for several seconds before answering. Grandpa. The old man's weak voice came through the speaker. Did you find Claire? Yes. And? A long silence followed. Finally Ethan answered. I was too late. The old man didn't speak. I destroyed everything. Another silence. Then his grandfather quietly asked. Did she forgive you? Ethan looked at me. Hope flickered in his eyes. For one impossible moment. I understood exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to tell his grandfather everything would be okay. That people make mistakes. That love deserved another chance. That we could somehow go back. Instead, I gently shook my head. His shoulders slumped. No. He whispered into the phone. She has a family. A real one. The old man sighed. I see. You finally understand. I do. After ending the call, Ethan remained still. He looked around the bookstore once more. The shelves Daniel had built. The framed photographs on the wall. One showed Daniel holding Mason on his shoulders during Fiesta San Antonio. Another showed the three of us laughing at the beach in Corpus Christi. A third captured us painting the bookstore together before opening day. None of the smiles were forced. None of them belonged to the woman he remembered. They belonged to the woman I had become. I never knew you smiled like that. His voice was almost inaudible. You never gave me a reason to. He nodded slowly. I suppose I didn't. Before either of us could speak again, the front door opened. Daniel walked inside carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. He stopped the moment he saw Ethan. His expression remained calm. He crossed the room without a hint of hesitation and walked directly to me. Everything okay? I smiled. Yes. He looked at my face for a second, making sure I meant it. Then he kissed my forehead. I brought your favorite flowers. They're beautiful. Mason peeked around the doorway carrying a coloring book. Mom. He ran toward me before wrapping his little arms around my waist. Daniel rested one hand gently against my back. A simple gesture. Protective. Natural. Without ownership. Without fear. Just love. Ethan watched the scene in silence. His eyes settled on Daniel. I understand now. Daniel met his gaze. Understand what? Ethan smiled sadly. The difference between loving someone and simply wanting to possess them. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Some truths speak loudly enough on their own. Ethan looked at me one last time. I hope. He paused. Your daughter grows up knowing what love looks like. I placed my hand over my stomach. She will. He nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the bookstore. This time, no one called him back. He disappeared into the warm Texas evening exactly as he had 7 years earlier. The difference was, back then, I had watched him leave with tears in my eyes. Today, I simply closed the door behind him. The bell above the bookstore door rang softly as Ethan disappeared into the evening crowd. No one followed him. No one called his name. For the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not heartbreak. Just peace. Daniel quietly locked the front door before turning the sign to closed. He looked at me. How are you feeling? I let out a slow breath. Lighter. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Mason tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Dad? Yeah, buddy. Are the scary people gone? Daniel crouched beside him. They're gone. They're not coming back. No. Mason looked at me. You promise? I knelt carefully and wrapped my arms around him. I promise. He smiled, completely satisfied with that answer. Good. Can we finally eat cheesecake? Daniel laughed. I think we've all earned some. Later that evening, the three of us sat together in the bookstore cafe after closing. The lights were dim. Jazz played quietly through the speakers. Charlie slept beneath our table, exhausted after spending the day begging customers for treats. Daniel cut 3 generous slices of cheesecake. Mason immediately claimed the largest one. I need it. He announced proudly. I'm growing. Daniel raised an eyebrow. So am I. No. Mason shook his head. You're already huge. I burst into laughter. Daniel placed a dramatic hand over his heart. I've been insulted in my own bookstore. Our bookstore. I corrected. He smiled. Our bookstore. Those 2 words warmed my heart more than he could ever know. A few weeks later, the Calloway family made headlines across Texas. Ethan voluntarily stepped down as CEO of Calloway Holdings. The board announced he would be taking an indefinite leave of absence. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed it was because of his grandfather's declining health. Others whispered about internal family conflicts. The truth remained private. Exactly where it belonged. Lillian disappeared from social events almost overnight. For years she had enjoyed being photographed beside Ethan at charity galas and business dinners. Now, she quietly left San Antonio. No dramatic farewell. No public statement. Some stories don't end with revenge. Sometimes, people simply walk away carrying the consequences of their own choices. 2 months later, Daniel and I welcomed our daughter into the world. She arrived just after sunrise. Tiny. Healthy. Perfect. Daniel never let go of my hand. When the nurse placed our little girl into my arms, tears quietly rolled down his face. I thought I knew what happiness felt like. He whispered. I was wrong. Mason carefully climbed onto the hospital bed to meet his baby sister. He stared at her for nearly an entire minute. Finally he nodded with complete seriousness. I've decided. Daniel smiled. About what? I'm going to protect her forever. I looked at my son. You don't have to protect her from everything. I know. He answered. But I can protect her from the monsters. Daniel and I exchanged a smile. Children had a way of simplifying life. Maybe that wasn't simplicity. Maybe it was wisdom. Spring arrived in San Antonio with fields of bluebonnets stretching along the highways. The bookstore became busier than ever. Families filled the children's corner every weekend. Book clubs met every Thursday evening. Tourists often wandered in after exploring the Pearl District. Life kept moving forward. Exactly as it should. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel handed me a small framed photograph. It had been taken during the bookstore's grand opening years earlier. The 4 of us stood together in front of the entrance. Daniel. Me. Mason. Charlie sitting proudly between us. Everyone was laughing. I found this in my office. He said. I think it belongs out here. We hung it beside the register. Right where every customer could see it. Not because we wanted people to admire our family, but because it reminded us what we had built together. A home. Not made of bricks. Or money. Or status. But trust. That evening, after closing, Daniel and I sat outside the bookstore watching the sunset paint the San Antonio skyline in shades of orange and gold. Our daughter slept peacefully in her stroller. Mason chased Charlie across the small courtyard while laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Daniel reached for my hand. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever think about him?" I watched the sky for a long moment. "Sometimes." "And?" "I don't miss him." Daniel nodded. "I figured. I miss the woman I used to be." He looked at me. The one who believed love meant sacrificing herself for someone who never looked back. He gently squeezed my hand. "She's gone." "I know." I smiled. "And I'm grateful. Because the woman I had become would never beg someone to stay. Would never confuse loneliness with love. Would never believe she had to earn kindness." Daniel kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For surviving long enough to find us." Tears filled my eyes. Not from sadness. From gratitude. Years ago, Ethan Calloway signed divorce papers without reading them because he believed I would always come back. He thought he was closing a chapter. He never realized he was opening the first page of a better life. A life filled with bedtime stories. Cheesecake after work. Messy family breakfasts. Tiny footsteps racing through the bookstore. A husband who chose me every single day. And children who would grow up knowing that love was never about control. It was about showing up. Every day. Without being asked. As the sun disappeared beyond the San Antonio skyline, Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Our daughter slept peacefully. Mason laughed somewhere behind us. The bookstore lights glowed warmly through the windows. And for the first time in a very long time, I finally understood something. Home had never been the Calloway mansion. It had never been wealth. Or status. Or a famous last name. Home was the place where no one ever made me question whether I was loved.